We
All
are
right.
live. Okay,
We are
great.
live.
Um, and we'll just see
And
if anybody joins us before we officially start. But um, and I just have to watch the time. Okay, good.
good.
Yeah. So should we do an official opening?
I guess we should. Do you want to start or should I
Yeah,
start?
I will start.
Sounds good.
So greetings, Doug. Always good to see you.
Great to see
Just
you as
realized
well, John,
I saw you in person actually in 3 dimensions last week. So this
which is
is
great. I always love
yeah,
that.
that
That's
was
a
fun.
special treat.
Yeah. And it's a little bit chaotic here, so we'll just see how it goes today. We're in the midst of
Packing.
packing and purging
Yeah.
for a big move, and interrupted by a 5-day retreat. Which,
Jeez, yeah.
in hindsight, well, too late now.
Too
Anyway,
late now. Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't be if we were not leading it, but we are leading it, so it's you know can't really get out of it.
Yeah. Well, this is one of these podcasts where life sort of gets in the way, and life becomes part of the podcast, right?
Exactly.
You
So
might
you'll see what.
some of it in the background.
Yeah. And so yeah, it seemed like after sort of packing up most of my office, and now starting to hit the books, the number of books we have here, and deciding what to leave, what to take, what to give away, as well as other sundry items of clothing, and it's like I think renunciation is the topic of the day, and
Yeah.
in our modern lives, it's really hard to practice renunciation.
Yeah.
And I was just reading something from Ajahn Suchito's book on the paramis, and one of the paramis is renunciation, of course. And he wrote, "Imagine you had to carry with you on your back what you really needed. What would you take? Of all that's left, what would you make a second trip for? If that were all you had, how would that feel?" And then it goes on from there. But it's like, yeah, what do we really need?
Yeah.
And,
I guess we need credit cards.
yeah, but no, you don't need the credit card. That's just going to help you buy more stuff,
That's right.
And I mean, maybe just for fun, we'll put a link into George Carlin's wonderful take on stuff.
Oh yeah. Haven't
And
seen
how
that for
we
a long
accumulate
time, but
stuff.
yeah, he's brilliant.
And we have storage space downstairs where we'll store some stuff, and then we might have to pay for some other storage somewhere else. And then we'll take everything that we need out to Chicago, but there'll still be more than we need, and we have storage there. And so we'll put some storage stuff there. And it's really challenging. And, we've only been in this place for 14 years or 13 years. And the amount of stuff we've accumulated, and I know I had a conversation with your mom, oddly, and they're moving from a place where they've lived for 40 years,
Yep.
And it's just really interesting how much you can
accumulate
without even trying. I mean, some people, of
Yeah.
course, there is a we're not hoarders. That's a whole different thing, but it's a challenge. And
Yeah,
so
you
the
don't really
idea of
realize how
yeah,
much you have until you move.
and there is something beautiful about kind of living this monastic life where basically you renounce all of that stuff, and basically you have your robes and your bowl, I guess a change of underwear or two, I mean, it's like that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, other things are provided for you, of course, and if any monastery is going to collect stuff, but hopefully a lot less than most, we would in a house. But it's so there's, and that's related to, of course, letting go in general.
Yeah.
And what are we holding on to stuff for?
Yeah. I mean, as I recall, there was John Cha talks about, you were talking about the question of whether monasteries collect stuff, and he was saying once, I remember, that their monastery got a lot of Buddha statues, and they were always being given these statues.
Sure.
And as I recall, he was sort of saying that he was in a process of trying to give them away to people who would come in. He's like, "'Cause we don't need any more statues." And
Right.
so even they have that problem,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
We have a question or comment here from Something
Comment. Yeah.
Psyche. Yeah.
Yeah.
We kept a lot of our
Great.
belongings in storage for a few years while between homes. We decided that if we hadn't gone back for something in the last 4 years, it wasn't needed anymore. And
Yeah.
that kind of
That's
thing
certainly true.
can
Yeah.
be a good practice if you haven't.
Yeah.
I think there was what was her name who did the clearing out,
Oh yeah. Maria Kondo.
Maria Kondo. Yeah, I did a video on
Yeah.
her a long time ago. And she and other people say, the kind of thing like, if you haven't touched a piece of clothing in a year, consider getting rid of
Right.
it, and so on.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, there are going to be some pieces of clothing maybe you will need every 3 years, but most of it you probably won't.
Yeah. Or you save it for some future event, and it's like, when I was going through files and things, I thought, well, if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, what do I want to leave my partner with, or my
Yeah.
heirs with, or whatever? It's like, to deal with, as little as possible.
Yeah.
And I do remember, because I had the benefit of when my mom died. I mean, she lived a very long life, and we moved her out of her home into a assisted living, and in that process, we got rid of a lot of things, and then we moved her from her assisted living place in Cleveland to a new place in Massachusetts. We got rid of. By the time she died, there was nothing left to get rid of. I mean, there was barely anything left of her, but I mean, there was. It was, it was so lovely to like remove things and sell them or give them away, and yeah. So it's a practice. I think this whole practice of renunciation is a really fruitful practice on so many levels, and it's to say nothing of renouncing those things which we carry in our head that we don't need.
Yeah.
It's like what I often will start a practice, with what can you let go of right now that isn't helpful, and because it is true that, like, I think the more your external world is cluttered, there is something to be said about the internal world being cluttered. And how
or
do we
you
work with that?
use one as an escape from the other. And I think a lot of people do that, as they use the external stuff
Yeah.
around them to
Yeah.
get away from the internal chatter, because the external stuff sort of keeps their senses attached and active and all the rest, and so they don't have to sort of listen to themselves.
And it,
I mean,
yeah.
I find the internal stuff more difficult, frankly, than the external, but that's just me.
Yeah. Well, I think that's generally true.
Yeah.
But it's also so sad. I mean, I was reading a really depressing story it wasn't depressing, but it was definitely sad in the Times of over the weekend, I think, of this, couple who, high flying couple that had a house in the Hamptons and a house in New York, fancy cars and a boat and all this stuff. And they were living the high life, basically, and sharing it with the world on Instagram or whatever. And turned out like it was a whole house of cards, but of course they had kind of created, or the man had the sad thing is that supposedly the wife didn't know any of what was going on with the business world and of the man, and he kept like betting on things that never happened because he needed to support this lifestyle that he had created. And it's like, and then you have to let it all go. And or the famous movie that was done a number of years ago about the Queen of Versailles, which is about this house that was being built by this very wealthy couple in Florida. And they wanted it to be the biggest house in America, and they at some point, they had private planes or chartered planes or whatever, and at some point they lost everything. And I just remember the first time the mother and the kids flew on a regular plane, a flight, the kids wondered who all these people were. And it was just like so sad, it's like how
Yeah.
we can get addicted to things. So, it's really just a useful practice to not as a way of punishing ourselves at all, but just like saying, oh, well, what can I let go of today? Do I really need this?
Yeah.
And it's hard because we live in
Yeah.
such a materialistic world.
And
Um,
stuff can become a burden, I think, to us
yeah,
because stuff that we have has to be taken care of, has to be dusted, has to be cleaned, has to be maintained.
yeah,
And yeah, I mean, when we were, moving out of New York, it was about at the same time that we had the house fire up here, basically,
yeah,
and a
yeah.
lot of
Oh,
stuff
that's
was
right.
gotten, yeah, a lot of stuff was gotten rid of in both places at the pretty much at the same time, not exactly, but close. Um, and I think it was because of my uh, Buddhist practice, with renunciation, that it was easier for me, and that people around me would react with sort of shock and horror, and having to throw all this stuff away. And I sort of that wasn't really for me. It
Right.
wasn't. It
It's
really wasn't
liberating.
difficult. Yeah, it was liberating. It really was. I mean,
Right.
it's like,
Yeah.
this is an easy way to get rid of a whole lot of stuff that would have taken me, because when you have a house fire and
Well, that's yeah, yeah,
in our case, it was all smoke damage, or most of it was smoke damage, and
yeah,
we had a team come in, paid for by the insurance company, that their whole job was to catalog everything and throw everything out. And it was like, that was so liberating. It was like, because that would have taken me weeks,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but they
Exactly.
were, that was their job. They were being paid to do this. So it was like, thank you so much. You're doing it,
Yeah, you had it
you know,
easy.
yeah, I mean,
I
in a certain
mean,
sense we
I wouldn't
did.
I wouldn't recommend that method, but it's
No, no,
in
it was
hindsight,
not
of course.
something. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's just it does make you realize, and in that way, moving is good every few years, just to kind of,
Yeah.
or at least act as though you're moving. Just say, well, what do I not need? And
But it's a job. It's a job to do that. I mean, the
yeah,
reason that we don't do it is because I mean, not only is it psychologically difficult for many of us, but it's literally physically difficult because,
sure,
you
of
know,
course.
uh,
Like,
going through masses of junk that you have in your closet, just it's time consuming,
and
and
it's also emotional,
yeah, it's emotional too. Yeah. Hmm.
and some people hang on to things for nostalgic reasons, and I understand that.
Hmm.
Um, and it's also different, I think, and this is, another way of seeing it. If you have heirs,
Hmm.
what do you, and you care about leaving them something. What is it like? That's one thing. If you don't have heirs, that's another thing. And
Hmm.
um, yeah, so it's just been an interesting week. Looking at these things, and of course, even things that are just printed documents, most of which I have somewhere on my computer or in computer storage, digital storage. It's like, well, do I really need to keep this in print? If I
Hmm.
know I can print it at any time. And then it's like, and now, of course, caring for the earth, right? I have a bunch of CDs I have to get rid of,
Yeah.
and that's a challenging thing. And there's we will be taking a lot of things down to this big organization in Brooklyn called Reuse, which is an enormous space that has just so much stuff that people realize has some value to somebody, but they don't want to throw it out, so they take it to Brooklyn Reuse, and it's just a big, exactly what it says. It's just like And so we'll take a bunch of books and recordings and stuff down there, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
or have it taken. And, we'll feel good about it at least. We won't be just adding to the trash stream, theoretically. So there's so many elements here. Environmental, it's like, what are we harming?
Mm-hmm.
So harm comes in, renunciation comes in, generosity comes in.
Mm-hmm.
All these things are playing into it.
I think I mean you were mentioning heirs, and I think that's a good thing for a lot of people to, I think, practice with, because um, I think, at least in my experience, I mean, I don't have heirs, so to speak, but
Nor do I. Well, I have
yeah,
a niece and few nephews. Yeah,
yeah, me too. But I think for many folks getting on in years, there tends to be a feeling that the younger people will want everything that I have. And the truth is that the younger people will want almost nothing of, of what you have, and would prefer that get rid of,
yeah,
98% of it. I mean, of course, there'll be a few things. I'm not, there's always going to be a
yeah,
few things that people care about and matter to them. And obviously you want to talk to them about that. What sorts of things would you like? But when they say, I want this and this, but the rest of it is not, then you have to, because I think a lot of us cling to things and the assumption that people will want them when we're away, when we're gone. And the
right.
fact is that most of the stuff that we own just, it doesn't matter to them any more than it's just in the closet for them too, and
Yeah,
they
yeah,
have their own stuff, in their closets.
yeah. But
You know,
it's interesting, right? Because your mother is an artist,
yeah,
and she'll undoubtedly leave art around, that she would hope
sure,
somebody would take, and maybe they will.
sure. Mhm.
Um, and I was remembering an old friend who died about 10 years ago, anyway, whose wife had been a potter, a very established potter, and she had died before him, and he had so much of her work lying around his apartment,
Yeah.
and they didn't have kids. It's like, so you wonder where all that stuff went. And so all this to say, this practice of renunciation is a significant practice, and the more we can practice it in small ways, I think then when it comes to the big ways, we, really, it can really change our lives, and it is a liberating practice,
Mhm.
on many levels. And of course, the final renunciation is the renunciation of this body that we've been using for our lifetime, and at some point that's got to go. Are we able to let it go,
Yeah.
or let go of the people around us? When
Hard.
they,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's interesting because I was in contact with a friend whose mother died, in her mid 90s, and she was a very vital person. And he was writing me about the day she died, and it was a typical case of, you know her not wanting him to leave, but when he did leave, she died. So in other
Mm.
words, there was a holding both ways, right?
Mm.
When he was no longer in the room, she could let go. I mean, this happens often, like
Mm.
the moment the closest person leaves the room, when you're on your deathbed, then
Mhm.
the likely is that there will be an ease in the letting go.
Mhm.
Um, and, and so, as we just practice in these little ways, letting go of possessions, or letting go of, it's mostly possessions, letting go of
Yeah.
nostalgic memorabilia, whatever it is,
Mhm.
tchotchkes that are around the house. It's like, it's, it's all a practice, you
Yeah.
know, and, and a really
I mean
important practice. Yeah.
I mean, the associated practice which we've been discussing here, but I thought I'd just bring it up specifically, is generosity,
Hmm.
because I mean it's a very related practice to renunciation, in the sense that we can directly renounce something by giving it to somebody else. Uh, there's You were mentioning this group in Brooklyn. We have something called a swap shop near us,
Right.
where at the local dump, where it's just a room, and if there's something useful that you don't need anymore, you can just bring it in there,
Yeah.
um, and leave it on a
Small town
shelf.
living. It's the great thing about
Yeah,
small town living.
it's wonderful,
Yeah.
and, oftentimes, I've, been walking towards the swap shop with something in my hands, and somebody comes up to me and says, "Are you taking that to the swap shop?" And I'll say, "Yes." And they'll say, "Can I have it?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, take it." And it's like, it doesn't even make it to the floor.
Yes,
But that's
please
great.
take it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great. That's a great
Yeah.
feeling,
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
don't need it, and, of course, I could try to the other way to do it is, sell it on eBay or something, and, yeah, of course, if it's really valuable and you really some people make money out of that, and I don't wanna say that's a
Mhm.
bad thing, but for me, 99% of the time, it's sorta like, it's just I would prefer to give it to somebody,
Yeah. Yeah. So my biggest letting go right now is probably going to be my motorcycle,
Yeah,
on
yeah,
which I put, I don't know, 60, 70,000 miles.
yeah.
And,
I know that matters to you. You love that motorcycle.
and, I'm just it's going to be interesting to let it go. I'm still waiting for, somebody to put up the money, but it's coming
Mm,
soon. And,
yeah.
and it's okay. I'll miss it for a while. I can always get another one, I guess.
Well, that's
And,
the thing. Yeah, yeah, you can
yeah.
always get another one.
And, uh, yeah, and so it's just like, "Oh, okay, so there's one weight gone,
Yeah.
next." And it's
Yeah,
just this
yeah,
feeling of it's very interesting, right? This word enlightenment, which we interpret as one way, but it's really sort of
yeah.
making our lives lighter
Lighter.
by
Yeah, I
letting
hadn't thought of
go.
that. Yep,
And,
that's true, true.
so yeah, so I just encourage people to think about, like, well, what do they really
Yeah.
need,
Yeah, and I
and
think the replacement is important to think about as well, in the sense that, for a lot of our book for instance, I mean, books matter to me a lot, and
sure.
we had to get rid of a pile, I mean, an enormous pile of books, in both places, when we moved and with the fire, um, and my feeling with all of it was, look, most of them I've read, I've already read or looked through enough to know, um, look, if I really want this book again, I can
Yeah,
always find it somewhere. I mean, 99, most of the time, I can find it again somewhere
right.
if I really want it. And if that's enough for me to be, sort of like okay with it, I mean, like with the motorcycle, I mean, if you really want it again, you can always,
Yeah,
find one.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
And then most of the
So
time you won't. So, which just goes to show.
and then again, as people who listen to this show know, the one thing that's really hard to renounce is coffee,
True.
but, coffee is also an easy thing to take with you and it's not a big burden.
No.
Um, and it does make life easier at times. And, there's no need to let go of coffee.
No, and if you don't have a coffee machine at home, you can go out and find it somewhere, right? You can go out
Yeah.
and buy a cup of coffee
Yeah.
somewhere.
So if you'd
So,
like to support the show, you can feel free to buy us some coffee through diggingthedharma.com and buy me a coffee, um, which is, very helpful for us to support the show, to cover our costs.
yeah.
And
For a member,
every once in a while, buy a coffee,
yeah.
literally. So, um, yeah. So, friends, as we wind down this hour, we will be off for a few weeks as I settle in Chicago,
Yep,
um,
and
and
have your retreat as well.
retreat. Yeah, so I think we might be able to reconvene in about 3 weeks, if all goes well. And yeah, until then, we have a whole backlog of podcasts.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Yeah,
there's plenty there. Um,
yeah, and
yeah,
enjoy your retreat, and I'm sure that I mean, Chicago's a great town, so
yeah,
you'll have a good
I know.
time. We'll
I'm not
be,
worried about that.
yeah.
Once we get there, I'm not worried about that.
Yeah, it's the
All right.
it's the intermediate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, friends, be well. And
Thanks,
I
John.
see that somebody just signed on and we're just about to end, but it'll be there. Okay,
It will.
friends.
Thanks a
Yeah,
lot.
take care.